have a question with regards to the ability to display art. So I appreciate that oftentimes, especially with the most valuable pieces, the original cannot be displayed, so as to protect it from disintegration, environmental damage, etc. So you see this in a lot of natural history museums, or even pieces of art like the Monets in Giverny, France. And so my question is, how might the metaverse, or in particular NFTs, possibly disrupt or enable the viewing of originals? And a follow-up question to that is, how might this impact the art piece from an investment perspective? So this can be for any of the panelists. I know it's quite a broad question.
How do you think that NFTs will change the way we experience actual art? I think you were saying something about this earlier, Gareth, that you feel like it's not going to be, it's going to be a completely different experience, although an accessible experience. What do you have to say about that?
Yeah, absolutely. It's a great question, because if we think about holography, so the kind of the implementation of hologram or holograph technology, I think that's really interesting as far as, excuse the sun right on my face, as far as us being able to be kind of in two places at once, and that's going to continue. In addition to that, I think the technologies alongside AR, VR and XR are coming on leaps and bounds. There are some fascinating companies in this space that are experimenting and creating experiences that, as you mentioned before, you know, Monets, etc., that can be tangibly then. Speaking to some of the people who run these companies, the first thing they would do would be that they would acknowledge it's not exactly the same as being in front of the object, the original, but it's as good a digital representation of it as is currently possible. And if you're happy to take that marginal hit and say, well, at least I can see it, then the advantage of that is huge. It's huge because if you think about access to culture from a sociological perspective, it basically opens up access and engagement to communities that otherwise would have no chance potentially of being able to see, or travel to, let alone see, value objects that we value as part of our historical record. So I really like the opportunity of that. If you think about also, during the pandemic, we were able to access, institutional tours, large museum tours via our laptops or smartphones. So it meant that I didn't have to go to Paris to see a particular museum, for instance. And I think that is great, because that just gets more people discussing the pros and cons of aesthetics, and I think that's a really wonderful thing. So the other point that you made, which is really great, is if you've got objects that are sensitive, or the materiality has potential to be compromised in some way, then absolutely placing them in a climate controlled location with relative humidity, temperature and all that kind of thing is vital. And also lux levels, light. I can tell you from first-hand experience, it does have an impact on the surface of objects, myself included. But certainly by making sure that those objects are kind of securely stored. But if we can create renders of those objects and then create a way of accessing those renders, then I think that's so good from a cultural proliferation perspective. So yeah, there's a huge amount of opportunity there, and I just wonder who is going to fund it. That's the key thing, and that'll be an interesting thing to sort of see what happens in the next few years.